Hey folks, this is Astus. In this video, I want to talk about loot and equipment in Baldur's Gate 3. Frankly, with Baldur's Gate 3, I was a little bit worried about the loot, because in Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian's last big CRPG, I found that their loot design was probably the weakest part of the game. What I look for in a loot system is equipment that you can slot into your build that actually does something tactically that isn't just, gradually improving bonuses to your stats. I look for actual features that are similar to class features that you can stack together and synergize with each other. I just really want loot to be an important part of the build, is I guess what I'm saying, not just part of your stat progression. And then because of that, I also really want loot to be found early enough in the game that I get to use it. Getting a really fun item just before the last fight is so frustrating because there's no fights left to use it on. And honestly, in Baldur's Gate 3, Larian's really delivered on this. There are so many interesting and good items that you can get in Act 1 of the game that stay relevant for the entire game. You can really make builds around them. I love it. And so in this video, and another one, a sequel I'm going to be making later, I want to talk about those items. In this one, I will talk about the 10 best non-weapon items that I think you can find in Act 1. And then in the next video, I will talk about 10 best weapons you can find in Act 1. I have given priority to tactically interesting items, like I've said. There are some really good items that just are stat boosts. I've left them out because I want to talk about items you can build around. Also, I am not ranking these in any particular order. I'm just throwing the 10 that I think are best at you. The first one I talk about isn't the best one or the worst one or anything like that. So with that in mind, let's dive into the items now, starting with this one, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. This one is really, really fun, supporting a Gish build that is a build that wants to both cast spells and make weapon attacks. When you're wearing this Diadem of Arcane Synergy, and you inflict a condition, you gain Arcane Synergy for 2 rounds. What is Arcane Synergy? Your weapon attacks deal additional damage equal to the affected entity's spellcasting ability modifier. So how this is going to work, as you can see in this build I have here, usually I would add my dexterity modifier to the damage of my attacks, in this case a +5, but if I have Arcane Synergy procced, I will also add my charisma modifier to the damage, in this case a +4. So with each attack that I hit while I have Arcane Synergy, I will be adding +9 damage, 5 from dexterity, 4 from charisma, and that is just for my statistics. You're effectively double dipping on bonuses to the damage, and that's a lot, especially in a late game build when you're making a lot of attacks. You can absolutely use this all the way into the very last battle of the game, and it's going to be good. But the big question to ask is, how easy is it to actually get those Arcane Synergy rounds? Remember, this procs if you inflict a condition. And because we want to be using our turns to make attacks, we really want to inflict conditions while making attacks. How hard is that? Well, honestly, it's so easy. There are all kinds of attacks in this game that inflict conditions. We're going to be talking about some items in the game that inflict conditions on attacks. So just for example, Wrathful Smite frightens a target. That's a condition that will proc Arcane Synergy. As another example, an item we'll be talking about later, Gloves of Power. This procs the Bane effect on attacks, and that would give you Arcane Synergy. And if you don't have any of that on your build, you could always just use features like Hex or Hunter's Mark. These cost a bonus action and your concentration, but they always land on a target. Once you hex a target, there's no chance for them to resist at any part of the game. I guess I could say the only way this could ever be resisted is if someone spends their reaction to counterspell it. But so if I hex a target, and I have the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, on my attacks against that target, not only will I be doing the extra 1d6 from the hex, but I'll also be adding 4, maybe even 5 and up to 6 late game damage from my ability score modifier. That is the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. Next up is the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. I believe I have these on Lae'zel. So, Disintegrating Nightwalkers, these are boots. You can loot them off of Nier in Grimforge. When you're wearing these boots, you gain the Nightwalker ability, which means you cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and can't slip on grease or ice. On top of that, it gives you Misty Step. Misty Step's like a teleportation ability that costs a bonus action, and this version of Misty Step will refresh once per short rest. Misty Step's already an incredible ability, especially on melee strikers. Melee strikers can do a lot of damage in this game, but they have to be able to close the distance on priority targets, and there probably isn't a better spell for that than Misty Step in the game, so getting one per short rest with these items, already really good. And then on top of that, it has this ability where you can't be enwebbed, entangled, ensnared, or slip on grease or ice. Now, these are area of effect crowd control effects that can really get in the way of your melee strikers if they don't have these boots. And then when you get these boots, you can actually start using terrain effects like that to your advantage. You can cast a web spell against your enemies, and then run your melee striker Lae'zel in there to attack them. She will now be attacking with advantage against the restrained targets, and she has no danger of being stuck in them. That works with web, it works with entangle, it works with grease and ice. Honestly, the grease and ice ones are particularly good. Knocking targets prone not only gives you advantage against them, but if you can find a way to bring their movement down to 0, it effectively works like a stun. And so effects that bring their movement to 0 are effects like Maimed, Restrained. Restrained's a really good one. Frightened is a really good one. All of these bring a target's movement down to 0. So if you can layer those effects on top of each other, you're kind of like stunning them. And Lae'zel can get frightened if you go the Battlemaster route with her, with menacing attacks. So Grease, Lae'zel runs in with the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. It starts hitting people with menacing attack. Such a good combo, it stays relevant for the entire game, and you get these boots relatively early. I'm usually around level 5 or 6 when I pick these up from Grimforge. So that's the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. Next up is the Gloves of Power that I mentioned earlier. These ones you get extremely early, pretty much right at the beginning of the game. You get them from the Goblin fight at the gates of the Grove when you first discover the Grove. Gloves of Power give you Absolute's Bane. On a melee hit, you possibly inflict a minus 1d4 penalty to the target's attack rolls and saving throws, and it also gives you +1 to your Sleight of Hand. Sleight of Hand is a very, very useful skill. Not useful in fights, but outside of fights it is invaluable. The minus 1d4 penalty to a target's attack rolls and saving throws, this is the Bane effect, like the cleric spell Bane, is really brutal. A 1d4 will average around a 2 or a 3 on a roll. A -2 to someone's attack rolls really adds up. It might not seem a lot if you aren't familiar with the math of 5th edition, but I have to tell you, it's a lot. And then also to their saving throws. Again, that's almost even more potent. There are some spells in this game that target saving throws that can completely decide an encounter. Spells like Hold Person, Hold Monster, Dominate Person, Fear. If you can land those, you pretty much just win. Very, very valuable. Like I said, you get these right at the beginning of the game, and you can pretty much wear these right to the end. And it does something tactically that I like, which is your striker will hit attacks, proc the Bane, and then your controllers can land a spell like Hold Person, which then enables your strikers to guarantee crits on their melee attacks. So there's like a give and go kind of synergy to it that I absolutely love. It used to be in early access that you had to get the Mark of the Absolute to use these. I mean, you could use them, but it would also bane you if you didn't have the mark. But as far as I can tell, that has been changed in full release. So the Gloves of Power, even better now. Next up on the list is the Amulet of Branding. I also have it on my tab here. You can get the Amulet of Branding if you kill the Quartermaster in the Creche. This is giving you a once per long rest ability called Brand the Weak. It doesn't cost anything in your action economy, and then for 3 turns, the single target that you cast it on becomes vulnerable either to bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing damage. You pick which one. Damage dealt to a target that is vulnerable to it is doubled. Okay, so if I deal 10 slashing damage to a target that's vulnerable to slashing damage, it's now 20 damage. That is so good. This is the ultimate boss killer ability. I saved this for whatever I think is going to be the hardest unit to kill in my planned long rest. And once you hit this on them, especially if you have a character that does a lot of upfront damage, like any fighter that has action surge, an assassin for example, you'll be dealing hundreds of damage with Brand the Weak. Now the limit to this is it's only once per long rest, but you don't actually have to keep this in your necklace slot the whole time. You could have another necklace in for most of the adventuring day, and then right before you fight that boss, swap in Amulet of Branding and just go to town, you know, enjoy these massive 50, 70, 80 damage numbers you're dealing on an attack. Extremely fun, extremely powerful. I was using in my completed Tactician run, I used the Amulet of Branding to defeat the boss at the very last fight of the game, and it worked like a charm. Such a phenomenal item. You get right at Act 1. Next up on my list is Adamantine Armor. I really like this one. So there's actually 2 variations of Adamantine Armor. I have the Splint Armor in this save, but you can also get a medium armor. Is it a breastplate or a scale mail? I can't remember exactly which. Anyways, it doesn't super matter. Just the idea is that you can get the same kind of thing either in a heavy armor variant or a medium armor variant, or I guess if you wanted, you could get both variants in a run, but then you wouldn't be able to get an adamantine weapon. So what does Adamantine Armor do? Well, besides just being pretty decent armor as far as armor class goes, it also reduces all incoming damage by 2. That's not just physical damage, it's all damage. And flat damage reduction in this game is very good. I think a lot of people are sleeping on it. What makes it so good is the way the game calculates damage reduction, where it calculates resistance first, that is your percentile damage reduction, and then it will do the flat damage reduction, like from this armor. So if I have resistance to physical damage, which you can get pretty easily, it's going to already half all physical damage. Let's say someone deals 10, you're going to half it to 5, and then you subtract 2. You've taken that 10 damage down to 3 damage. That's a 70% reduction in damage. But that's just one feature you get from this. You also get intense adamantine backlash. When a melee attacker hits you, the attacker is sent reeling for 3 turns. A target that is reeling is recovering from a terrible blow or hitting a strong metal, has a -1 penalty to attack rolls for every turn remaining. So this is stacking up. If someone hits you and they get 3 turns of reeling, that is a -3 to their attack roll. Massive. That's huge. If they manage to hit you twice, they now have a -6 to their attack roll. That is a little bit more of an accuracy debuff than Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter. So a lot. If they manage to hit you 3 times in a round, now they're looking at a -9. I mean, you get the idea. Eventually, you're going to debuff their accuracy so much that they'll start missing, and then their reeling will actually start to decay. Amazing. If you can get targets to attack you, you will be debuffing their accuracy so much, and this cripples any encounter that has a lot of their damage and attacks and not spells. Completely cripples them. Absolutely amazing ability. And then, finally, on top of all of that, attackers can't land critical hits on the wearer. I mean, critical hits do tend to be overrated, I find, but still, they deal a lot of extra damage, and this completely defeats that. And this is particularly good if you get hit with like a hold person spell. Usually, when you are paralyzed, like if you've been hit with hold person, attacks made by enemies within melee range of you are automatically hit and automatically converted into crits, and this just counters those crits. So you can be hit by a paralyzed and still survive the round of attacks that's coming against you, and then while you're being hit by all those attacks, you're actually debuffing their accuracy so that when you recover from paralyzed, they're less likely to hit you. Just so good. There are a lot of really good armors in this game, but this is one of the better ones, and you get it so early. I think I forgot to mention, you have to forge this in the Grim Forge, which is kind of a puzzle, but you should be able to figure it out. I don't want to spoil it for you. So that is Adamantine Armor. Next up is the Grymskull Helm. Lae'zel's also wearing that right now. And you get this also from the Grim Forge. You actually loot this off the Grim Forge Golem's corpse if you defeat them. While you're wearing this helmet, attackers can't land critical hits on the wearer. I shouldn't actually double these up like I've done, but this is basically giving you another character that is immune to critical hits. That is the main selling feature of this helmet, and that is amazing. But on top of that, it gives you resistance to fire damage. That is good, but I find that resistances are easy to come by in this game, so it's more likely that this can be obsolete by mid to late game. And then it gives you Hunter's Mark, which you can cast once per long rest, and that is fine, because Hunter's Mark is the kind of ability that lasts until your next long rest, as long as you maintain concentration on it. And especially if you're a fighter like Lae'zel is, you probably will maintain concentration on it, because you have proficiency in constitution saves, and then with very little investment in other items, you can usually also get advantage on constitution saves. Hunter's Mark is like Hex. It's giving you an extra 1d6 damage on all of your weapon attacks, so this is a mix between amazing defense with immunity to critical hits and giving you some dimension for your strikers with Hunter's Mark. I love this on fighters because fighters don't usually get a use of their concentration action slot from their class. They have to get it from itemization, and this is a great item for that. So that's Grymskull Helm. Next up on our list is the Gloves of the Belligerent Skies. Got to go back to my tab here.
No time to rest.
Here we go, Gloves of Belligerent Skies. Now, this is one I haven't been able to test that much, just because there's so many good items. I haven't really had an opportunity to fit this into a build yet. And I've heard from people that it's bugged, but as soon as the bug is fixed, this is going to become such a good item. I'm absolutely astounded at how strong this is. When you wear the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, you get Thunderous Conversion. When the wearer deals thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, inflict 2 turns of reverberation upon the target. Reverberation. The affected entity has -1 penalty to strength, dexterity, and constitution saving throws per remaining turn, so this stacks up. And then when the entity has 4 or more turns of reverberation, it takes 1d4 lightning damage and possibly falls prone. This is the part that I hear is bugged. Honestly, it doesn't matter that much because this isn't actually the big selling point. It's this first clause that's the selling point of reverberation, the penalties that you are applying to strength, dexterity, and constitution saving throws. Now, some of the best spells in this game don't target constitution, they target wisdom. So you usually like to debuff wisdom, but constitution, in my opinion, is a close second. One absolutely devastating spell that targets constitution, just for example, is Contagion. Now, is Contagion that good of a spell? Not really, unless you can super debuff someone's constitution saving throws and reliably proc it after 3 rounds of the condition. Then it becomes really, really incredible. But there are other abilities in this game that target constitution as well. And of course, there's some amazing spells that target dexterity, spells like Fireball, for example, that just do damage. Doing damage is always great. So you can apply some amazing debuffs if you have a way to very quickly stack reverberation on a target. And that's what makes Gloves of the Belligerent Skies so much better than other reverberation items that I've seen in the game, is that it procs every time you deal thunder, lightning, or radiant damage. And there's a ton of ways that you can get thunder, lightning, and radiant damage on your attacks. So just for example, another item that you can get in Act 1 is the Ring of Absolute Force. And if you have the Mark of the Absolute, you're going to deal 1 additional thunder damage on your attack. Another great way of dealing thunder damage is the sword Falar Aluve. I think I'm pronouncing that right. We'll talk about this in the next video, but Falar Aluve allows you to once per short rest give an aura where everyone in the aura is getting thunder damage on their attacks. And that's just thunder damage. Lightning damage you can get from stacking up lightning charges, and there's a lot of items in the game that give you lightning charges. Radiant damage you can get from smites. You can get from Improved Smite. If you're a paladin, you can get that on every single attack. Yeah, there's just lots of ways to augment your weapon attacks with these kind of damage types, which means you're going to be proccing reverberation on every attack. And especially by the time you get to late game, you can make 5, 8, 10 attacks on a target every round. So that could be, if you hit all of them, up to a -8, a -10 to their Constitution and Dexterity saving throws, now you're practically guaranteeing all of the spells that target those saving throws to hit on that target. And again, it creates this awesome synergy where your weapon attacker debuffs the target to line up your debilitating spells from your casters. I absolutely love it. I just haven't had a chance to really test it yet because the game hasn't been out long enough. If you have used this item, please let me know your experiences with it in the comments. I'd love to hear how you felt it ranked up. That was number 8, Gloves of Belligerent Skies. Number 9 now is another pair of gloves, the Gloves of the Growling Underdog. You can get the Gloves of the Growling Underdog from the treasure room in the Shattered Sanctum. By the way, I think I forgot to mention this. The Gloves of the Belligerent Skies you also get in the Inquisitor Chamber of the Kresh. There are some really, really good items in that one encounter. But Gloves of the Growling Underdog, in my very first Tactician run on this game, I slapped these on Lae'zel, and I kept them on her until level 12. It wasn't until the very end of the game that I found a pair of gloves that compared to them in terms of power. They're just so good. So while you are wearing these gloves, you get Underdog's Bravery. The wearer gains advantage on melee attack rolls while surrounded by 2 or more foes, and then you also get a +1 to your strength saving throws. The +1's not that big of a deal. It's Underdog's Bravery that's so good. Now, advantage on attack rolls is a big boost to your accuracy, especially if you are using a Great Weapon Master build. Great Weapon Master is one of the best DPS strategies in the game if you can find ways to reliably offset that -5 penalty it gives to your accuracy, and Gloves of the Growling Underdog are a really great way to do that. Now, you have to be surrounded by 2 or more foes, and that can kind of be a pain. I'd say I get this. If I'm not playing around it, I get it in maybe half of my turns, but you can build a team around getting this really reliably just through displacement. So for example, if I have a monk or a warlock that can reliably push targets, you can start pushing them to group them together on your turns to set up your fighter with these gloves to get advantage on their attacks. Once you are down to killing the very last opponent, you won't have advantage, but it doesn't matter at that point because there's only one guy left. You shouldn't have any problems killing them. So there's not much to say about this except that accuracy is insanely good with Great Weapon Master, and this is such a good way to boost your accuracy, and you get it right around level 3 or 4 in the game. Incredible. Next up is the Periapt of Wound Closure. That's this necklace right here. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I've read this word many times, but I don't think I've ever heard it pronounced. Periapt. Is that right? Let me know in the comments. With this necklace, when you are downed, you automatically stabilize at the start of the turn. That is already pretty good. Basically, it's making enemies use 1 extra attack to really kill you. So you can see this is burning an attack. Attacks are very high value. Burning one is valuable. But then it also gives you potent healing, and this is the part that you can really build around. While you're wearing this necklace, you maximize the number of hit points restored. Now, this is unclear because it doesn't tell you whether it's hit points restored on the healing spells that you cast or if it's the healing spells cast on you. So I just want to clarify for you all, it is all healing that you receive, not that you give. You want this on your frontliner who you expect to heal. I love this to combine with some of the various passive healing effects in the game, and there's one of those effects you can get again in Act 1, right around level 4 or 5, and it is the Shattered Flail. The Shattered Flail is a weapon that heals you 1d6 on an attack. 1d6 will average around 3 to 4 hit points healed per attack. But if you have this necklace, it's always going to be a 6 on every attack. If you are a character with extra attack and you're hasted, you're attacking 4 times in a round. That's assuming you hit all attacks. 6, 12, 18, 24 hit points healed per round. That means you can tank 1 24 damage attack per round and still heal that reliably. Incredible. And that's just one item. There's a ton of other items in the game that offer passive healing. Most of them you don't get in Act 1. Some that are worth mentioning, the Ring of Regeneration, it gives you a passive 1d4 every round. The Sword of Chaos. There's also Watery Rejuvenation you can get from the, I think it's called like the Wave Shapers Cloak, the Wayshaper's Robe, I think maybe it's called. You get that in Act 3. That will give you a passive 1die4 healing if you are standing on watery surfaces, which sounds pretty niche, but there's actually a lot of items that give you effects if you stand on watery surfaces, which make it kind of worth it. Anyways, hopefully you get the idea. You stack this with any kind of passive healing effect, and you become so tanky. Oh, I forgot to mention Moon Druids. Haven't tested this, but Moon Druids can use spell slots to heal themselves. If you're healing yourself for max, absolutely insane tank potential. I haven't thought about doing a solo build, but this might be an interesting angle for people who like solo builds to explore. Anytime you're healing yourself on attacks, you can hit kind of like a critical mass effect where you're killing targets and you're basically taking no damage, and you can just solo encounter. So that's the Periapt of Wound Closure, and I think that's all 10 of the items on my list. Let me just count to make sure. No, I have one left to do, and that is the Magic Ring. I cannot believe I forgot about Magic Ring. I said I wasn't rank ordering these, but I mean, if I was, this would have a very, very convincing case to be the GOAT magic item that you get in Act 1. I mean, man, it's one of the GOAT magic items you get in the entire game. Just gotta find it here. I'm not even wearing it right now because it's just too OP. Magic Ring. Okay, this one's tricky to get. A very persuasive merchant will sell this to you in the Druid's Grove. The best thing about the Magic Ring is that it's magic, and it's just way better to be magic than not magic, I find. Also, it's super rare, so that is number 10, Magic Ring. Some honorable mentions. I really like, it's probably not as good as I want it to be, but I really like Broodmother's Revenge. This is another necklace that you can use with healing builds. So with Broodmother's Revenge, you get Venomous Revenge, and whenever you're healed, your weapon becomes coated in poison and will deal 1d6 poison damage on hit. 1d6 damage on hit is a lot. That's around 3 or 4 extra damage. And you can do that every time you get healed, which you can do very reliably. Even if you just drink a basic potion on a bonus action, suddenly you're getting an extra 1d6 on all your weapon attacks. Or if you have the Shattered Flail, like we talked about before, that's healing you on every attack, and now you're also getting poison on every attack. Really good. The big weakness that this has is that it's poison damage. And poison damage is great in Act 1, but you pretty quickly, especially in Act 2, you start encountering enemies that are resistant or just absolutely immune to poison damage. And so I couldn't really put this on the list, because even though it's a great item in theory, it doesn't actually scale into the late game, and that's the point of these items. You want items you get early that you can build around. Are there any other honorable mentions? Oh, Holy Lance Helm. I like this one quite a bit. If a target misses you with an attack, like for example, if you are debuffing them with the Reeling effect on Adamantine Armor, they will start taking radiant damage, and then you can combo that with the reverberation effects that we've already talked about. It's just retaliation damage, and retaliation damage is really, really good, so Holy Lance Helm is a good honorable mention. And actually, the Devil Foil Mask. This one is very, very interesting. Again, I didn't include it because I don't feel like it actually scales that well into the late game, but I just want to show you what it does so that you know. A lot of people overlook this because it doesn't tell you what it does in the description. I gotta stand over here by Gale, because he has the other one. So you see, when 2 people are wearing them, it gave me this condition called Infernal Legion. They need to be standing within 20 meters of each other, and when they are, every person with Infernal Legion gains a strength increase of 1, but they lose Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma by 1. So +1 to Strength, -1 to Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma per nearby mask. And you can find up to 4 of these masks for the 4 members of your party. If everyone wears one in your party, everyone in the party can be getting up to +4 to your Strength. Of course, at the disadvantage of having a -4 to Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. Now, that can actually be worth the trade. Strength scales so well in Baldur's Gate 3. It's improving your shoves, it's improving your jump range, but most importantly, you can double it with the Tavern Brawler feat. Right? You're doubling the value of any strength boost. So a +4 to your strength is more like a +8 to your strength. Instead of adding +2 to your attack rolls and your damage, it's adding +4 to your attack rolls and damage to every member of your party if they all take Tavern Brawler and are all wearing the Infernal Legion mask. Now, I think this is good, but it's kind of memey. You need all of the builds to be strength builds. You need them all to be taking Tavern Brawler or something equivalent that scales with strength. And you need them all to be fighting within 20 meters of each other, but it's fun enough and interesting enough that I thought it merited an honorable mention. So anyways, that is my 10 plus a few bonus best items that you could find in Baldur's Gate 3 that are not weapons. If you like this video, please subscribe. I will be doing another one soon of the 10 best weapons that you can find in Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3. I've talked long enough. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.